Hi there. This is Frank Brill with another episode of the Enviropolitics Podcast. Let's get right to it. Hi, this is Frank Brill, editor of Enviropolitics, with the second of our two-part episode on contamination at military bases in Pennsylvania and New Jersey that has affected the drinking water supply for 70,000 folks in Pennsylvania and an undetermined number yet in New Jersey. We've been speaking with newspaper reporters Kyle Bagenstos of the Bucks County Courier-Times and Christina Nasuti, who are part of an investigative team for the two newspapers that are owned by Calkins Media. We would recommend that you listen to episode number 20, in which Kyle and Christina provide a really good background to the issue, and in which Kyle explained how some 70,000 residents near the former military bases in Horsham and Warminster, Pennsylvania, had been drinking water that was contaminated by a chemical used in fighting fires that had gotten into the groundwater and left the base and got into the public wells that supply the drinking water to those customers. We're going to pick up today with Christina focusing on the potential impacts at the joint bases, which is the term used now to describe Fort Dix, McGuire, and Lakehurst.
And how about the joint bases, the impact there, potentially?
Well, the impact of the joint base isn't to the public water systems around the joint base, like in Pemberton, Lakehurst, aren't as great. We're looking at, the joint base has been focusing on the potable wells, so the private well owners. We have a lot more private well owners around the base, like in parts of Pemberton Township, Manchester in Ocean County, in Lakehurst, Borough in Ocean County, and just north of the base in New Hanover. So those are where the private well owners are located, and that's where the joint base has targeted the testing. They did conduct tests of the Pemberton Township municipal water supply under the UCMR3. No detection there. Lakehurst was the same, although that well was not under the UCMR3 program. That was a testing that the joint base had conducted on their own. There were no levels that were found there. However, when we're looking at the private wells, we have 3 private wells that we know of right now that showed levels well above the 70 parts per trillion. Those residents, 2, I believe, are located in Lakehurst and 1 in Manchester. Actually, no, not Lakehurst, Jackson Township. Yeah, Jackson Township and 1 in Manchester. They have been provided with bottled water, and as far as I know, filtration systems have been installed in those homes. But there's only about a 50% response rate for private well owners. So we don't know how many others are out there that do have contaminated wells and that they're drinking from them, just because there is such a low response rate from these residents.
Let's talk about the response rate, because I was surprised to read that in one of your stories, that what you mean by that is the military actually solicited, they notified homeowners nearby and told them that this could be a problem, and but 50% of them, as you say, just ignored it or never got the message or whatever.
Well, it's not ignored. I mean, there could be a number of factors here. I mean, we're talking about properties that are set back hundreds of feet. We're talking about abandoned properties. We're talking about properties that have fences and no trespassing signs posted on them. And then we're also talking about people who look at the letter, they get lost in the shuffle, and they kind of forget about it. So it could be a number of things. I mean, as far as I know, the military has, they have gone door to door. If nobody's home, they leave a letter, a permission slip, asking the resident, can we have permission to step onto your property to conduct the testing? They explain what's going on, and then they wait. As far as I know, they've done that 2 or 3 times. I'm not sure if they've done it again. To my knowledge, they have tried to reach out to the residents that have not yet responded more than once. But there's no telling to date how many other residents responded since we wrote the story back in March.
What kind of a response has your story elicited, either from readers or from public officials?
I mean, we get comments here and there. It's probably not as strong as the response from Warminster.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're still pretty early in the joint base in New Jersey of looking to see what potential impacts are there. I mean, like I said earlier, with the UCMR program, I mean, it was pretty evident as soon as they released those results and the word got around to the public that that tens of thousands of people have been exposed to this, and I think our coverage, a lot of the strength of it was kind of letting people know just what that meant. These are not familiar chemicals to people. It takes them time to even, begin to understand what the potential repercussions of this are. So, in New Jersey, obviously, not having any kind of exposure at that level, there's going to be, less people who are concerned about it. But I think we're still early, as we just said. The testing program, needs to be completed. I think they're still trying to get a handle on where the contaminated water, especially the groundwater, has flowed to in New Jersey. So a lot of times they'll go out, they'll sample a home. If they get a high result, I think one of the homes had a result in, I think it was like 1,600 parts per trillion,
yes,
which is the EPA's limit is 70. So the math on that is considerable. So typically what they'll do, if they have a high level there, they'll look and say, well, where does the groundwater from that point, where does that flow from there, right? So then they'll do a follow-up round of testing to try and, so they're going to go through that step-by-step process, I believe, to look at this. And another thing we're digging into too, which is the subject of our most recent story, was what potential past exposures have there been on the joint base. They, especially on the eastern portion, the Lakehurst side, predominantly use wells from the Kirkwood-Cohansey aquifers, which are shallow aquifers, very subject to contamination, sometimes as low as shallow as 15 feet deep, typically I think more in the 50 to 80 feet deep kind of range. The joint base has tested a lot of those on-base supplies. And the subject of our most recent report, as I said, was the fact that they found high levels of these chemicals in two of the wells that aren't being used currently, but historically our research found that they have been used to some extent over the past 10 years during certain portions of that time period, providing the majority of the water to a water system serving, I think, 3,000 people, labeled as that. So, and that's only going back 10 years. These films have been used since the 70s. So in terms of what people were exposed to previously, what levels, there's still a lot of unknowns in that way.
So the 3,000 people who did use this water at some point or other, I assume they were servicemen and women on the bases, but and beyond that, were there, I guess, public employees who work at the bases, and were there families of service people?
I mean,
who lived there too?
The 3,000 served is a combined residents, contractors that would come on the base, employees. I mean, most of the time, if you're living on the base, you're working on the base unless you're a family member or a child. So anyone that was using that water at that time could have been potentially drinking contaminated water. But there's nothing telling, other than pumping records and data that we collected recently, saying that they definitely have been drinking this water that has been contaminated for that long of a period.
Yeah. So a lot of states, and this includes New Jersey, will characterize their water systems by terms like community or transient or non-transient. They kind of to identify what kind of water system you're talking about. Is it just something where workers use it, or is it something where it's very seldomly used or used for an industrial purpose? So the system we're referring to is called the Hill system, and that's on the Lakehurst portion of the base. As I said, this is from the state records that it serves 3,000 people, and it's listed as non-transient community, which would mean you would expect that the people who are using that system are there on some kind of permanent or residential basis. So, from what we can gather from looking at the information that's available, yes, it would be serving personnel, as Christina said, serving personnel who are living on the base, as well as anybody who's just there for a contractor or on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, there's a lot to this, and you've done some great work, and have to point out the statistics you brought to bear in your stories is very impressive. And I think we're going to have to wrap it up here, though. We're in 21 minutes in. But what I'd like to ask you is just tell me this. A lot of people should be very interested in the work you're doing. Is there an easy way for them to access it?
Oh, I mean, everything, all of our articles that we posted about, both sides, Pennsylvania and New Jersey, are on BurlingtonCountyTimes.com. It's under our Unwell Water series. So if you go to the main page, news, Unwell Water, it's broken out in its own section, and everything is in front of our paywall. So it's easily accessible to everyone.
Okay, and it won't disappear after.
No.
And we encourage, actually, that's something that our company has decided to vote. Typically, we have a 24-hour paywall on any stories, so they'll go up, they'll be on for 24 hours, and then you'll have to pay for them. The Unwell Water series, which covers all of our coverage in both sides of the river, Pennsylvania and New Jersey, as a company, was decided to, as a public service, we brought in front of that paywall. So all of it's free and accessible. As Christina said, we have a place on our website that should be pretty easy to find and access, that has all of the stories as well as maps and frequently asked questions.
Well, certainly anyone who's ever had any history involved with the bases should be interested in following this as you go along. And like you said, it's not going to be resolved tomorrow. The results have to come in from the testing and so on and so forth, and then we'll see if more wells have to be closed down or if long-term health tests are going to be required. And a very interesting story. Thank you both not only for the reporting you're doing, but for giving me some time today to get it out to my listeners and readers.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Okay.
Well, that's it for today's show. But we want to remind you that if environmental issues, news, legislation, and regulations in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, and Delaware are important to you, check out our daily newsletter, Enviropolitics. That's one word, Enviropolitics, capital E, capital P. You can receive the newsletter free for 30 days. You'll find us at enviropolitics.com. I think you'll also enjoy our Enviropolitics blog. Just Google it. The same goes for our Enviro events calendar. Just Google Enviro, add a hyphen, events calendar. Thanks for listening and for reading. See you next time.